Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, in Poland, the government has found itself accused of a cultural purge after the boss of the country's World War II museum was sacked. It wants a public gallery with a more black and white, less morally ambiguous take on Poland's role in World War II. In the first case of its kind, the ousted director is suing. In Poland and indeed across Europe, this case is being seen as the front line in the continent's new culture wars. Porrica Brown has this report from Gdansk.
This video installation is the centerpiece of the World War II Museum Gdansk. History as action film trailer.
First, Germany attacks. Then Soviet Russia. We don't give up, despite being left on our own.
The film is now at the front line of the fight for who gets to tell a country's story. A fight that has ended up with two museum directors facing off in court. The ruling party in Poland, Law and Justice, has a nationalist Catholic vision for the country, something they want reflected in the museum in Gdansk. So they ousted the old director. He's on his way to court to sue the new government-appointed replacement.
I became a symbol of someone who betrays the Polish nation. They accused me and my team of creating the anti-Polish museum, the museum which is cosmopolitan, pseudo-universalistic, which is pacifistic and anti-war.
For the ruling party, this historian and his more outward-looking internationalist take on Polish history is a cultural traitor. Case in point. Under his tenure, this was the film that visitors saw when they left the museum, an interpretive anti-war mashup of world history. It was replaced by this.
Nobody thought the war and its effects would last half a century for Poland.
A celebration of Polish resistance. History meets Call of Duty.
Polish Jews fight the Germans in the Warsaw Ghetto.
For the ousted museum director, the new film and other changes to the museum are part of a wider authoritarian assault on culture and politics in Poland.
We have an attempt to impose one narrative about history, one approach to history, one approach to culture, this one which is promoted by the government and by the ruling party. This is like coming back to the times of the communist regime, which I still remember.
The Polish government got rid of him because they say that he overemphasized the politics of Poland blaming at the museum, that Polish people coming to visit under his tenure were sent on a guilt trip. The new administration here at the museum wants the narrative to be less morally ambiguous, wants the lines to be clearer between who were the villains and who were the victims. Unfortunately, sometimes during the war, the lines became blurred in Poland, particularly around how Jews were treated in some areas. We started by asking the current director about the film. It almost felt like a recruitment video for the Polish army.
Tak, to jest film, który na pewno buduje morale Polaków, pokazuje, że powinniśmy czuć się dumni z naszej postawy w czasie II wojny światowej.
Your opponents say that you are a government-appointed cultural puppet, and that that's a dangerous thing to start happening in museums. How do you respond to that?
No, przede wszystkim mój poprzednik był bardzo bliskim współpracownikiem pana premiera ówczesnego Donalda Tuska. Był osobą zaangażowaną politycznie i został postawiony na tym stanowisku przez polskiego premiera Donalda Tuska. Ja dostałem propozycję pracy również od polskiego premiera, tylko premiera, który reprezentuje już nie to środowisko, jakie jest bliskie mojemu poprzednikowi, stąd nazywanie mnie właśnie w ten sposób.
For me, it's one of the most powerful examples of what was missing in the exhibition.
The museum spokesperson wanted to show us an example of how he feels the previous administration got it wrong.
Father Maximilian
Kolbe was a Franciscan friar who volunteered to die in place of a Polish army sergeant at the Auschwitz death camp. He was canonized in 1981. For Polish Catholics, an icon of faith, resistance, sacrifice. But under the last museum director, he didn't get a look in.
Before we installed this thing here, there was not a single word about him in the museum. Why? I don't know. Because he was a priest? Because he was considered to be a right-wing priest? I don't know.
We put this to the ousted museum director. He said that part of the rationale not to include Kolbe originally was to do with some evidence of anti-Semitism in his writing.
The Pope gives us strength. Workers' strikes spread throughout Poland.
The competing films will form part of the court case in Gdansk. As far as we know, the first of its kind. The detail is about who has what claim to the exhibition's copyright, ousted director or replacement. The big picture, though, is about two competing visions of a country's identity facing off in court. The saying goes that the winners get to write the history. In this courtroom, that is literally the case.
The war is over.
The new European culture wars have just begun.
Ulrich O'Brien reporting. Well, during my interview yesterday with the Polish Prime Minister, I asked him about that museum. The accusation, again, I'd like to know what you say about this, is that this government, your government, is trying to rewrite Polish history. Is that a fair accusation?
No, this is not at all a fair accusation. This is completely the opposite what is happening, because we know how badly the history was distorted in the communist times. Well, I have experienced this very personally. And then after in 1989, it was distorted in a different way as well. So we are just bringing this to a state where lots of open discussions, both sides are on particular topics. Yes, in particular about the Second World War and what happened after the Second World War. And now I believe we come more and more aligned on many different issues.
I've been